are back.
It's so loud.
We're back in
Alarm
regular
activated.
session and we are still, so we're back to 9.2 housing for police chief.
Move to approve, or is it approve or
Or maybe Kathy could,
I think Greg wrote your,
just read what you said and I will say what she
How about-
said.
To authorize negotiating and submitting an offer on the market rate unit in Mountain Sunrise listed for $729,000 and to negotiate with owners of the STRs who have indicated interest in renting long term.
Yeah, that's the move, the motion.
so we have a motion, I'm sorry.
No. Yes,
Need a
second.
second.
Yeah, I got
Okay,
it.
we have a motion from Dwayne and a second from Alec. I'm not gonna reread the motion. Does everybody understand the motion?
Yes. What's most important is Kathy understand
Any,
it.
any further discussion? Tiffany?
Michael,
Yep.
Alec,
Yes.
Roman,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
Janet,
yes,
Mayor Kempton.
Yes. Okay, next item is electronic meeting resolution. Kathy and Greg.
I could start if you want to just. We would like to have a little more definition from you of what you prefer or don't prefer. There was a lot of discussion around different subjects of allowing people to vote or not allowing people to vote, or appearing remotely or not appearing remotely. And I question whether you can have someone actively participate in the meeting and count them absent. That doesn't sound right.
right, that's kind of where we got hung up and. we weren't
Say
sure
that
we
again?
had-
If you're going to allow somebody on Zoom to actively participate in the meeting as a member of the council, you can't really say they're absent. Their name is going to show up in different places in the minutes.
Right, so do they count for a quorum, but they can't vote, or do they?
I thought that's kind of what we.
Yeah, I thought we
was
kept status quo.
Was you could.
Well, we've
be-
never counted you as a part of a quorum. If you call in, you've never counted as a
Okay.
part of the quorum.
But if you're going to let the member participate, they really are present. They're not absent.
I would agree with that.
it'd be a
So
question
then
of
that would,
listening and-
if
But
they're
if
going to
they're
participate.
present, then how do you stop them from voting and counting as a quorum?
Well,
It's
that's,
for agreement among all of you. I don't know if you could stop someone if they were adamant about it.
well, logic, or no, let me rephrase
Dwayne
that.
logic coming up.
My logic, which is questionable, but my logic says if you're participating, you should be able to vote. You know, voting is just an extension of participating.
But based on the way we were talking last time, I think that just means
Yeah,
that we've
we-
decided it's not a quorum.
We just.
Yeah.
We talked ad nauseum
And
about
and
that.
so I guess I understand your point, Greg, that a counselor who was appearing remotely, if they made a comment or something, that might show up in the minutes.
Except
And a
that the
news
way
article.
Tiffany does minutes, probably not.
But I mean, it
Well,
hasn't
they're still
happened,
on tape.
That's true.
it hasn't happened that often. But I guess I don't know why a counselor couldn't like give their opinion with everyone's understanding that they don't get to vote.
Be like a public speaker.
Well, but it's more participation than a public speaker would have.
Yeah, it is.
And so
terms of when they
you
can
could
come.
count them as a quorum, and if you as a group want to through a resolution, say, but you can't vote, you can do that. You're coming to an agreement among all of you. Legally, I don't know if it's enforceable if someone was elected and totally disagreed with that. But as long as all of you agree to it, that's just a standard you've set.
Well, yeah, and I guess, I guess status quo would mean that they were not part of the quorum.
Well, they
They're
would
not
be,
part-
they would be part of the quorum because you're counting them as present.
No,
Well, then if
status
you're
quo.
status quorum, you gotta be able to vote.
So that's what I'm saying. So status quo is you can appear at a meeting by phone. You can ask questions, obviously listen, but also ask questions, but you don't count as the quorum.
Oh,
and you don't get to vote. So,
That's status quo.
so that's status
Well,
quo.
barely status quo though, because I think that's only a Zoom thing. Historically, before Zoom,
When we had
whoever
the
would
phone.
call in would just be able to listen. Then we
Yeah.
didn't have the
I asked
capacity.
sort of. It's been,
Right.
you know, several years ago, probably the last time I missed a meeting.
Oh, God.
Sorry. But I called in and it was before our technology and it was terrible to hear, but I do remember asking a question about a particular item. But again, I did not count in the quorum and I was not able to vote.
Okay, so
So-
we'll accept your status quo is listen, maybe respond or participate, not count as a quorum, not vote.
We won't
That's
kick you off.
current.
We won't
correct.
kick you off if you happen to make a comment or something.
Right.
Roman.
Just for another perspective, when I remoted in, I very much tried to participate
Mhm.
and not just ask a random question. So
Totally.
I think the expectation would be that if somebody was remoting in, they would be effectively involved in the conversation, interacting as normal because of the technology allowing it. You know, we had our sort of special circumstances that we all recognized as loosely being a permissible absence. So perhaps we go that other route with allowing the vote with the understanding of what a acceptable absence is. And then if it becomes abused, then we enact something more stringent. Like we
Didn't go
just,
there until I had a better definition of what an acceptable absence is.
we talked about medical reasons, plans that simply could not be changed. And I'm not talking about, you know, like I'm going to a Nuggets game tonight or something. You know,
Plans that
trips that
couldn't
were,
be changed would
yeah,
include.
trips that were planned a
We got a
year in
river trip
advance.
down to
or-
Grand Canyon and I
Thank God you don't have
can't
cell service
get a
down there,
different permit date.
So I understand your point. I just, as I recall, this is exactly the point. The last time we had the discussion that we sort of punted and went with status quo because that's the tough part, like sort of
Slippery slope.
coming up
Well,
with those
and that's-
detail, what's an acceptable absence and all that stuff. So
And that's what I'm saying, you know, rather than try to account for every scenario, give it a try, and if it is perceived to be abused, then look at it again, because, you know, I mean,
Well,
I don't know.
I just
we're
feel
both
so
in the
confident that
past-
when we walked away from the conversation last time, there was not a lot of traction on that we all were kind of like of the mind that it didn't work. And
Right.
so I don't think we should revisit it. We spent a lot of time talking about it. Yeah.
Michael,
Yeah, I think I mentioned last time that elected or supposed to be elected, right? Elected, it's an honor to be serving, therefore, I think to vote, you need to be in the council unless there is a designation that we have to go remote again as a
as a
total
body.
council, as a body. Then obviously that's a different situation, but I think, I think the only thing I would change on the status quo, and I don't know how this works, if it's, because it's contradictory, though, that you count as a quorum, but you can't vote.
And is that the status quo that you count as a quorum if you're on the phone?
No,
Okay.
that's what I'm saying, I'd like to change the
You want
status
you want
quo
it to be a quorum.
to be a
Well-
quorum, but you can't vote. I don't know if that works.
I
think
I
it
would
does.
say that
I think it does.
if you are,
Then,
you know,
then I'd
well,
go with
see,
status quo.
if you're counting as quorum and there was like only 3 other people and then there was you, that would be 4, you know,
But you could
to
vote.
make a quorum, but if you couldn't vote,
I think
you
a
know,
quorum means you can vote.
Yeah. that's kinda what I
Exactly.
thought.
quorum equals
Then I
vote.
would go with the
I'm
status
still
quo.
with the status quo.
Well, maybe they just
Yeah,
make
there'll be
this-
table talk and that's fine. I don't think there's any problem with that. We don't have to like make some sort of clause that allows for it. We just continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they can speak.
Well, no,
Okay.
if you don't want to count them as a quorum, just tell them they can listen, but they can't talk.
Participate, right. Participation means you're logged into Zoom and.
But they can
That's fine with
certainly
me.
participate as any other person would, like public comment or
No,
something like that.
Because they're not public.
Oh, fair enough.
So this would be more restrictive than status quo that we have been doing.
Well, no, because I think, even though Nicholas said he got 2 months, we had a lot of times we told people that they could not talk because they were on the phone.
Then what's the point of having this technology and calling in? I can listen.
For
Well,
your
because you can
own,
hear the minute, the discussion, you
As
are
it's
prepared, you don't have to
happening.
listen to the tape afterwards.
I could listen to the tape when it's convenient for me. I
Well,
mean,
so maybe there isn't a point to it then.
Yeah.
But it's still beneficial for other reasons, like for the public to participate or the other things that we talked about.
But I'm gonna step on that slope. It's a little bit slippery,
How's
but,
your tread?
okay, check my shoes. But could I say that you can participate as a quorum member with at least a previous meeting's notice, we have a meeting the 19th, right? So if someone was gonna participate, has to be mentioned within this meeting. We have to approve that.
well,
but then we're back to the
actually,
whole
Tiffany, you
scenario
have.
based.
Then we're back
you
to being
have an
very judgmental.
approval, what you consider
No.
approval.
You guys
you?
don't follow it. I don't know when for the most times, there's many times I don't know who's showing up and when. No, it's rare you guys tell me when you're gonna be gone, honestly.
But you're supposed to know.
You are supposed to
And
let
the
me
only reason
know.
you don't is because we've abused the system. So if we stopped abusing the system, we could actually have a clearly defined excused absence if we followed the rules that you put in place.
Well,
I'm missing the second meeting in September.
yeah, well, I mean, my thing wasn't, this, if then this. Mine was, if you tell us the previous meeting in advance, then that's good enough.
For whatever.
To
whatever
qualify,
reason.
to qualify as an excused absence, which
No,
Essentially-
no, to qualify as a quorum member and with voting privileges.
Unless
if-
you're sick.
And if if 6 people do that, would we have a quorum and have a remote meeting essentially?
So that gets really.
Yeah, that defeats the whole,
Right.
yeah, that's the tricky part.
No, I-
But
that-
but
and
how
that's-
realistic is that? That 6
Can
people
we
are not
solve the
gonna
problem
be.
just by coming up?
Oh,
with
we were
another
down to
word
4?
Other than quorum that allows them
Recently?
to participate?
Twice.
Do we have to
Twice.
use the word quorum to allow them to participate?
Well, if you don't count them absent,
Then there.
Is there
Then
some
that's
gray
a tough
area
way.
word that
Yeah.
isn't a quorum that is absent?
Well, no, not really, because
Yeah.
that's the problem is if they count for the quorum, but then they can't vote.
Right.
All they are doing is counting for a quorum for purposes of being able to hold the meeting.
To me, a quorum means you can vote. If you are
Right.
counted as the
And that's what
quorum,
Greg
then
is
it
saying.
means you can vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we leave it as is and that you can't participate and you can't vote and you don't count as a quorum.
But you can be on Zoom.
But
and
you can be on it and listen to it if you want to.
Is that a motion or,
I don't think we need a motion. I think it just, Kathy needs to,
well, she'll type up.
she'll
the
type it up and
policy.
come back to us with.
Yeah, we kind of got, we didn't feel like we had enough direction on that.
well, I mean,
that component.
and I'm not gonna speak for Roman here, but I've kind of talked myself into a 2-week notice.
Roman was next, Dwayne. I see it.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan of not allowing any comment by the person calling in. I don't know what Steve's scenario is, whether or not he would even want to call in, but
Yeah.
he often has good insight and.
No, and I guess I'm still confused too, why you couldn't ask a question. You're not part of the quorum. You can't vote.
Because we do allow the public to
You're on
speak
the
some.
phone. And like why a council member couldn't ask Hillary a clarifying question about what the survey meant or whatever. In assuming that Kendra puts them in the minutes. Councilmember Bakani asked this question, but he's on the phone. And he can't, again, just reiterating, he can't vote. He's not a part of the quorum.
Well, one would be, in this, I mean, it's subject to negotiation or discussion or whatever, but one is if you're not able to vote, you don't really have a role. Like you can't not come to council one night and decide to come as a member of the public. Can't do it.
We are counselors.
Right. So in order to do your council duties, you have to be present, and that's what we're trying to define is what does present mean?
Okay, so if you call in, then it's listen only.
Well, that's up to you guys. That's
You
what
know,
we're,
and I'm just gonna, flip this on its head and say, we got this so we could not be here and participate. So to me,
We got this for the public, in my mind.
well, in my mind, we got this so people could not be here. And there was really no distinction between Roman and me as people and Roman and me as counselors. We're,
There is a difference, though.
well, I know, and I just, it was my understanding that we got this so that we could not be here and still handle meetings. And so the question is, or, the conundrum that needs to be figured out is it just for emergencies such as COVID? Because this is how this whole thing got started. Was it just about COVID, or could we expand it to include other contingencies? And I say we have the technology, expand it to include other technologies. Tiffany actually has a policy for what is an excused absence. We embrace it. If you have an excused absence, you can participate. You're part of the quorum and you can vote.
and you're not absent. That's what we're trying to
Well,
define.
and that's my whole point. We're not absent because we're present.
Well, then it's not an excuse.
Then it's not an excused absence.
Okay, so,
So we're trying to define. what
okay,
is
so
present
I say
versus-
excused absence. Let's redefine it to a reason not to be in the room. Call it an excused absence, a reason not to be in the room, whatever. And the reason, and the notification that you're not going to be in the room, which is the same thing as the old excused absence. You let everybody know 2 weeks in advance. Because I don't think there's anything that, comes up that, we don't know we're going to be gone at least 2 weeks in advance. I just say that, I embrace it, vote, you're part of the quorum, participate, you're here.
Alec and
Not
I
your
say no to
absence.
that.
Yeah, I'm really uncomfortable with that 100%, but also just because, not just because in general, but also because we already discussed it and decided we didn't want to do that. And so the idea that just because we got onto
What
this,
was the reason for not wanting to do it?
I don't know, but we spent a lot of time
That's
talking
my
about it.
point.
Well,
We can change it to anything we want.
we can, but I guess it doesn't solve more problems for, you know what I mean? Like it seems to be more complicated. That's all,
I don't see where it's more complicated.
I think the, where we are now lends itself to being more flexible with people being absent because of the conundrum and lack of participation. If we don't go that route, I would just request that we honor somebody's wishes if there's an agenda item they're particularly passionate about to move it to the next meeting or something like that.
I think
Because
that's.
that's
You guys are, No.
Okay, so hold on a second. If we do nothing tonight, or if no motion gains a majority tonight, where does that leave you? What does that make status quo?
Well, I don't think we did a motion last time. Did
Well,
we?
Yeah.
let's answer that question. So if we're not, if we're unable to come to an agreement tonight, where does that leave us?
Here we were at the beginning of the meeting where we're not clear as to what this language should be.
Okay,
Right.
so we need something then.
We need something, or you guys can keep thinking about it, or, talking without violating the open meeting law. And get back to us. My concerns are just a bright line rule. And that it's applied in some way that we don't walk in here one night and there's somebody that's planning on a public hearing for their application. And
All
there
the
isn't a
chairs
counselor
around
in the
you.
room, or there's only one or two. And that is, to me, very contrary to what your jobs are. And obviously, if we all have to be remote, then that's just the best we can do. And that's how it is now. And thanks to COVID, we have this ability. But if not, I think the goal is that you're here. And because we also have built into this that a person who is doing a public or quasi judicial hearing has the choice to say, I want to wait until everyone's here. And we need to know that, because applications have timeframes and there's limits within the statutes of how things have to happen and when they have to happen by and things like that. So we just have to know what to expect on any given, like, do we have a quorum? If not, applicant, we need to tell you that we're not going to have a quorum.
Yep.
So.
So, yeah, a couple things, Alex. The reason why I think I'm reiterating this and changing my mind is because from the information that Kathy and Greg have just brought to us is that if you are on the call, you can no longer participate. You're read only
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And so hence the reason why I'm pivoting a little bit on my stance there, which I think is important, because once again, this is 2022, not 1978. And we have the technology, we should use it. And it may not have been for what Dwayne thought or what Janet thought or what I thought, but I think this technology allows more participation if used. Roman in the past would not have been able to be in a couple of those meetings. I would not have been able to be in a couple of those meetings a month or so ago. And so I truly believe that we have to adapt. We have to move forward, and this is a tool to move us forward. If we go with status quo, like I said, it's essentially
It's
read
like
only.
we don't even have the
it's read only,
technology.
and it's
Greg
almost
has an
useless.
idea.
But I would go back to answer one of Kathy's points about somebody coming here for an open meeting. If we were to take my suggestion of announcing it 2 weeks in advance, when the meeting notice comes out, it will state that Roman and Michael are out next week, or will be appearing remotely. It will be in the meeting, will be in the meeting notice. So then that, at least that person who is speaking will know ahead of time.
About saying that no more than 2 people can be either on Zoom or absent in any meeting in order to call a quorum.
So, right, so, and what you and Michael have both said made me think of another thing though, is that, so then those people, we do that, right? And I say at the meeting before, I'm not gonna be at the next meeting in person, but I'm gonna be there remote, and then I have the dreaded technology problem getting in, and then if that blows a quorum,
It just blows a quorum. Because the same thing could happen that
Get a flat tire.
I flew
Because-
out of town for the weekend and I couldn't get a flight. I
Absolutely.
fully intended to participate, but
for sure, no,
so, I mean, those kind of things could happen
with in person, they could, seems slightly more likely calling in, but
Snowstorm. I think there was a snowstorm last year where maybe Kathy could come about.
yeah.
So,
But I don't count for a quorum.
But that's.
but just say, the combination of people who are having excused absence and people on Zoom cannot exceed 2.
Well.
So like right now, it would be 1.
Yeah, to that, I would say, in theory, that sounds good, but then what happens if then, Nicholas calls, emergency appendectomy, bam, you're there.
You could lose a quorum.
We would lose the quorum.
Yeah, that rule would make you lose a quorum.
But you would have lost a quorum anyway.
Yeah.
Because you guys were remote and he's now in the hospital. Sorry.
I'm still climbing the
And I,
second meeting in September.
and I would just say that, I would,
I'll be in the middle of the
and
Mediterranean.
this isn't like a woe is me or anything, but
And
I would not
calling
feel
in.
comfortable calling in for a meeting as mayor. So I guess that begs the other question. So then if I were to call in and be remote, would we have someone else run the meeting? And so just
Why
hearing,
not?
Well,
Why not?
that's why you have a.
That's
pro
why you
tem.
have a mayor pro tem.
Yeah, but if we are deciding that you have all the rights and privileges of a voting member and you are online, then you should exercise those rights and privileges.
agreed, and I think that's the way the policy would have to be. I'm saying I wouldn't feel comfortable.
And I did see
Doing
a town's policy that said if the mayor is the one on Zoom, then the pro tem runs the meeting.
Yeah.
If the mayor and pro tem are either absent or on Zoom, then the council will elect someone else to run the meeting.
Okay, so
So
there'd
that
be a
the
mechanism
meeting
for
is
that.
run by someone in the chambers.
Yep.
Well,
And of course, that would just be for the hybrid. If we're all on Zoom, then
Yeah.
that's how it goes.
in anticipation of some sort of motion, I'll just say, I've heard what everybody says and I agree with really almost all of it. I just think what Kathy says sounds best to me, and that's that we have a bright line with no sort of gray area. And to me, that is, you have to be present at the meeting, physically present at the meeting to count as a quorum and to vote. And if you don't think that we can ask questions remotely, but not count as the quorum and vote, then that's what I would like to see from it.
I thought we were close to something and we just walked all the way backwards.
I
I was with you.
Too.
No, I was just saying that just because every time we go down one of these roads, it seems to get to a dead end. And so even though it limits our ability to participate in the meeting in different ways, to me, the bright line is just sticking to that sort of hard and fast rule that we've been doing all along.
Here's what I heard from the suggestion is that the bright line would be no more than 2 can be absent. If the mayor is absent and remoting in, excuse me, let me start over. No more than 2 can Zoom in. And perhaps another policy is if a third person, and it's whoever calls in first saying to Tiffany, like, hey, I'm not going to be there at the next meeting. If that third person does the same thing, then they don't count. Then it's the listen only. Like, hey, we have our 2. You're the third. I'm sorry. If somebody can make it, then you'll go into that second position. And if the mayor is absent, pro tem runs the meeting. If both are absent, then a third person is elected. And I don't even know if there's a need for 2 weeks ahead of time, because if, somebody's family member is sick and you have to hop on a plane, 3 days before the meeting, I mean, that, I don't know why the timeline needs to count.
Well, I think the
Well, 'cause
timeline
Tiffany
does
needs
need
to
to
know
count.
for quorum.
And also because,
Because so it can be
For
properly noticed.
notification.
Okay.
and also none of you would do this, but somebody could. Tiffany, has anyone said they're appearing by Zoom yet? Because I'm gonna be really busy and I can't quite get there on time, and so I'm gonna appear by Zoom tonight. That's not what it's designed for.
Okay,
It's
so
designed
that 2-week
for
period's fine,
the-
yeah.
Yeah, the opportunity to be able to be on vacation and still fulfill your counselor role. Or helping a parent with something and still, be doing your job.
I
Something
don't
like
think the
that.
2-week thing, I think it's a legitimate
Yeah,
absence type of thing that would allow you to be on Zoom.
Or at least
if you're gonna go down this route, but I still don't wanna go down this route.
at least enough advance notice for it to be in the meeting.
Or the bright line, if it's at the previous meeting or 2 weeks ahead of time. And if it's outside of that window, then you don't count. If you're the third person, you don't count. So, I mean, it sounds like, I don't know where these two are at, but it sounds like we addressed some of the major concerns and have
Being
a
stuck in the mud.
fairly bright line.
I think you guys are 3-3 right now.
We're being what?
It does seem that
3-3
way.
right
It does
now.
seem that way.
So I guess what,
So we need to pass this in order to have a quorum,
so what troubles you, Nicholas? The most about what he just. proposed?
What troubles me is just, I guess to boil it down is the time, just that we would have this time at a meeting where we're looking forward to the next and figuring out who's gonna be gone and all that. You all have spent tremendous amounts of time on Zoom meetings. And I'm so happy that we have this technology. It is still, to me, not the same. It's not anywhere close to the same as being here in person. When I get to see your faces and the eye roll and I can hear Roman sigh. And so to me, the cleanest thing that keeps us on task, which is other agenda items and other business, is just keeping it super simple. I'm also really happy at like our attendance at these meetings. Like we have, I think just with Steve being out and you being out, we've had, I mean, it's so rare that we ever even bump up and like when's the last time we bumped up against a quorum thing? I mean, it's just been almost non-existent. And so I don't know if that's an argument for or against remote participation, but I guess I just like the way it's gone. I guess I just like the way it's gone now that we've been back in person.
Yeah, and I mean, I do agree, right? This is new. This information about clarifying present and whatnot does throw a wrench in the spokes. So readdressing maybe why we moved on from these considerations is certainly valid. I just, while I might not know or I can't recall the exact one-for-one progression we made to kind of, I do recall it being pretty substantive, and I don't know that this minor problem that we're running up against is like, big enough to overcome that real aversion that we seem to all have, is my thing. Like, we had a really awesome conversation where we discussed a lot of really intricate aspects of this, and I think it sounded to all of us like a big can of worms potentially at best, and I think that's still the case, even try to resolve. I don't know. I'm just not convinced.
I will move that we clarify the electronic meeting resolution by stating that Zoom does not count it towards the quorum, does not allow you to participate, does not allow you to vote.
We have a motion from Janet that in-person attendance is required for quorum and for voting and for participation. We have a second from Alec. Any further discussion? Tiffany?
Janet,
Yes.
Dwayne,
No,
Michael,
Oh,
Roman,
No?
Alec,
Yes.
Mayor Kempen.
Yes.
I will state the reason for my no vote is because it included no participation. So why even show up? Why even be on Zoom if you can't say anything?
The reason that I would, even if I couldn't count as the quorum and I couldn't vote and I couldn't participate, the reason that I would still call in is so that I could stay up to date with what was going on in council. And I wouldn't come into the next meeting unprepared. I know we can listen to the recording, and I guess if you're looking at it on a computer screen, the recording is probably virtually the same as.
I can understand the not counting towards a quorum and not voting. I just can't get behind the not being able to participate, because in the moment that a discussion is going on is the time when your, comment is most useful. And to have the technology, not be able to use it, like I said, I understand.
And I'm with you, Dwayne, and
You know.
you've heard the answer from
Right on.
our council, and so.
So it's.
So it sounds like we wait till
here's
Steve
the
comes
thing.
back and we have 7 people and we break the 3-3 tie.
Yeah, because right now the answer is the no's have it.
I will say
No,
what
they
Dwayne
don't.
mentioned,
Yes,
what
they
Dwayne
do,
mentioned
because
is still
any
like.
tie vote
fails.
is a no.
Or we could wait till
But
September
no, the
20 when you're not
motion
here. and bring
failed.
it back up. Right?
You know what?
You're not here September 20, right?
September 2nd.
I'll be in the Mediterranean and I am not calling in.
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
Well, but that
I will
actually,
tell you, it's hard to
be out on the
illustrates
cruise
another
ship and I'm
interesting
not
point,
calling
right?
in.
You're gonna
Like-
be
like
asleep.
Some gamesmanship.
Yeah, we
with-
can
with the-
push this and push this and then, oh, wait a second. Let's vote on this when she's not
Yeah.
here and, yeah. I mean, but if she was able to participate and vote, she still wouldn't, she said.
So anyway, we're past that now, and since Dwayne explained his vote, I'll say again, I do agree with Dwayne that that's what makes the most sense to me, is that you don't count for a quorum. You don't get to vote, but you do get to ask a clarifying question so that you can understand something better. And I take what you said, but it looks like we're on to the next agenda item, yes?
Well, if that was the motion, if what Nick just stated would have been the motion, I would have voted yes for it.
But
Well,
they
so
said
a
they can't.
clarifying question or,
Participation.
Being able to engage in the conversation.
That's different.
Those are two different
What's
things.
different is that you don't get to vote and you don't count toward the quorum. What's different is that your input is still allowed,
Well,
even though it's not a vote or counting towards the quorum, but it's still, because this interaction between the two of us right now is helping to clarify the position. And, and that's the whole purpose of the council. It is all the voices being heard. But if you deny a voice who's actually there, who might have something worthy to contribute, like I said, I can understand if you're not here, you can't vote and, you don't count to the quorum, but that you can't participate. I can't.
The general public can ask a question.
well, but you're not.
But we're not general public.
So so you're basically saying you can't even ask a question.
Can't even ask a question.
That was the motion,
That is what the motion was.
and that's why I voted no.
Yeah.
So we could go, I move to,
Well, hold on a second, Dwayne. I mean, the advice we're getting from
Council.
council is that we shouldn't do that. So, and you make
I
your
gotcha.
motion. I'm not keeping
Okay.
you from
It's
doing that.
very similar to, like Nicholas said, having to recuse himself from a Mount CB water and sand issue on an application process that's before the town council, and then letting him sit in here and ask questions and, provide opinions.
conflict of
It's
interest
very
is,
No, it is, because you don't get to vote, but you're still swaying the conversation.
Yeah. Good argument.
but when he recused himself and leaves, he's not part of the
Well, I'm saying
conversation.
if
but
you
if
were
you
gonna
remain-
say you can be on Zoom and
And
participate
participate.
like you're here, but you can't vote, you're still swaying the conversation as though you have a stake in it, but you don't get to vote. So it's very similar to, you know,
Yeah.
why someone who
Well, I guess
refuses
it's,
must
you know,
leave the room.
To me, that's the compromise. You know, that, yeah, you still are able to present your perspective.
All
I
right,
don't think it's a compromise that is just gonna hold out. So I think if
Okay.
it's either you figure out participation that allows quorum voting and such by Zoom, or but you
It's
can't,
either
you can't
all or
play.
none.
okay, so I think we're punting
Okay,
on this one.
okay.
So next item is discussion regarding moving elections to November. And my name is after that. So this is one of those items that council has discussed sort of over, not over and over again, but it's been brought up a number of times. It's just kind of one of those things on the list. And so we have it on the agenda tonight to discuss. I think to just sort of sum up things that have been discussed in the past is that having an election in April when everyone is out of town on their spring break and their desert trip and all that stuff is probably not the best thing for voter participation. And then similarly, or part and parcel of that is that we all vote in November on the big stuff. And so why not have this included in November so that everybody can just vote when they're used to voting? And I've seen it with some special district elections and things like that. Like, it's really hard to get the word out for an election that happens in April. And even if you do get the word out, is, you know,
It also,
Participation is
it
nil.
also helps on financial costs because then we're part of the whole big ballot.
whole big
Everybody
ballot
put-
Do a
in.
coordinated election with the county.
Yeah.
and all that. And so, but before we get into that discussion, Tiffany and Greg and Kathy, is there any downside or cost to do this, or some reason we might not want to?
I'll defer to those two.
I think you've mentioned the big issues that bear in this, and I think that's the reason a lot of municipal governments have gone to the November election. You hold the election with the county, so the cost is pretty minimal. You're not actually staging a standalone election for the town. And the unique thing here where everybody's gone in April, this place is a ghost town. So it just makes it really hard to hold an election and expect to have good participation. Unless everybody decides to participate in a different way.
I mean, it seems like mail-in
Mail-in
balloting
ballots.
mitigates that a little
Little
bit,
bit,
that, you know, if you're going out of town for spring break, you're still gonna have you should still be able to vote mail-in ballot, but
Well, it would be a charter election. So charter would have to be changed. And then when the city did this a few years back, we also had to have a question that corresponded to extend council terms.
yes,
So that was a little tricky to figure out, but we did it. And
yeah, because you'd
so
be
then
going from
in one,
April.
yeah, if the election doesn't get moved to November, then the second question of extending council terms, you know,
Goes
no,
away.
yeah.
And is it moving it up to November or back to November?
Up.
So back in time.
So,
No,
well,
forward
it would
in
it
time.
would extend.
Go
terms.
forward.
It would extend terms, not
Yeah.
shorten them,
So,
which I don't think you could, you can't shorten. Michael,
So that's a charter question. So we have to have an election to vote on that before we can vote to move to November?
Well, you have to put this kind of question before the voters.
So we need to have.
Oh, so,
A change
so
in the
we
charter
would move,
requires an election.
we would move to put on the ballot, changing our elections to
November.
coincide
But do-
with the national
or no, within
election
November,
cycle.
within November.
November.
Within
First-
Yeah, we
November.
would-
First Tuesday in November.
Yeah,
but so do we have to have that question in April?
No, you can do it in November.
This November?
But council terms
Yes.
would be, how do you extend council terms if you're not doing the vote?
That
till
would be
November?
part of the wording of the.
Well, but if you're gonna put it on the ballot to vote in November, it wouldn't take effect that day.
So, okay, the next November.
Yeah.
Well, it could be this November.
Well, but if you vote on it in November, they can't extend the term. You can't go in
Yeah, do we have anyone
So we
that's,
would extend them from April to the following
November.
November.
In the next election cycle.
Yeah.
Yes.
but we don't have anybody up.
I'm
If we
pulling
got it
up.
We
on the
don't vote in
ballot.
2023.
Okay,
We got it on.
got it.
So,
So,
It's a little brain damaging, but.
so,
I'll move
Maybe,
that we,
maybe something on the whiteboard.
okay.
Well, hang on, Janet.
I'll move that we notify the county that we would like to put on the November, on the ballot, November ballot to move our elections to November.
And to
No,
extend.
no, no, no,
the-
not yet, not yet. You don't do
Oh.
that part yet.
Oh,
That's
it's
that
not
was
part of the
Jan's
same
motion.
thing?
No, that's the second part of that.
Well, I'll second that, but then I would also
Well,
move.
hang
no,
on.
no, one motion at a time.
Could, and I'm sorry, Janet, could you say it again, please? I know Joanne's
That
second.
we would notify the county that we want to put on the November ballot, moving our elections to November
Because in
of even numbered years.
the way I understand it, this is discussion now, right?
No, it's not.
Okay,
So,
so-
or will be in just a second. So we have a motion from Janet and a second from Dwayne. Discussion, please.
So-
Why do you, I'm sorry, why do you just want it even number of years?
Because that's when we vote.
Wait,
Well,
just-
no, we could
Ours
vote on
are
all
always in-
sorts of stuff in
Ours are,
between.
huh?
Our
But
council
our
elections,
council elections are always in even numbered years.
Well, right, but
Right,
what if
but
it's,
what do you
what if
wanna
it's an
vote on something
STR
else?
regulation or something?
Oh, okay, I'll take that off.
You're
Ready
okay,
to
you're
withdraw
okay
the
with that?
amendment?
You'll amend your
Well,
second?
I have a technical question because if we do that, then that rolls in the issue about extending council terms to end in November instead of April. So does that have to be?
Well, let's just
No,
take
yeah,
it,
yeah.
let's just take it one
Okay.
bite at a
So
Right
time.
now,
I'll
We
second her
have to do
motion.
That because we can't have an election in November and then not have, we have to have that corresponding part, because otherwise council terms would end in April and then we wouldn't have anything
but
to deal with.
And that's why I
It's
say it has to be
Part
part
of
and
this
parcel.
motion.
One is part of the other. So the motion has to include the extension of the council terms from April to
Well,
November. So
doesn't it, I mean, because the way I understood Greg,
Well, right now,
I
we're
thi- I
just
think we're just-
notifying
I-
the county that we want to be
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
ballot. That's the
No,
only step we
and
need to
then
get
if
done right
then if
now.
it passes, we have
No,
to go
no.
back on.
No, no,
the-
no,
We're just notifying the county.
that's it.
Kathy's gonna develop language and
Okay.
then we're gonna approve that.
I'll
So
set-
the deadline to notify the county is July 29th, I believe.
Right, which is why we had to do it now.
29th. But either way, it's still coming up quickly, and we typically do a resolution to that effect.
Okay.
So we could follow this motion up with,
For our next meeting.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so,
and anything else that you guys might be thinking of, but this would just be notifying the county that the town has taken the formal action to be on the ballot.
and so then if the voters vote yes, in 2024, you would extend the terms and vote in November.
Yes,
Yep.
that's the way I understood it, yes.
And that's a second item that goes on the
Okay.
ballot.
Yes.
But so,
2024 or 2023?
It's gonna be
2024.
There is
2024.
no election in 2024.
but so
Yeah,
for
Nobody's
tonight,
term.
That would be extending them for a year.
No, you don't,
No,
they,
6 months, 7
they,
months, 6
the
months,
elections
5
are in
5 to
even
11,
years,
6
so it
months.
works the same way.
From April 24 to November 24.
Yeah,
so what
Gotcha.
we're talking about is notifying the county that we want to move our elections because of our deadline with the county. And then at the next meeting, Kathy is gonna come back with a resolution.
that will actually be the notification.
That'll have,
Yeah.
that'll flesh out the details. Is everybody
Right on.
comfortable with that?
Yeah, and we do have some time before the ballot language is set, which we can also confirm, but I think that's in.
I believe it's September, beginning of September.
Okay.
So is everybody
So if there's
comfortable with that? Are
anything
you
else that you
comfortable with
wanna-
that, Michael? Yeah. Okay.
You do have a motion on the table, though.
We do have, yeah, we have a motion.
And a second.
We do. I just want to make sure we were ready for vote. So we have a motion and a second to inform the county that we'd like to move our elections to November. Any further discussion? Tiffany?
Roman,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
Alec,
Yes.
Michael,
Yep.
Mayor Kempin.
Yes. Next item is homestead update. Greg?
We are still in negotiations through our attorneys, so that's just proceeding. And then I just wanted to add two other things to it that are public knowledge is we're, to answer questions prior, we are not in litigation. So I want to make that really clear to people. And that the input we received that there's been construction activity on site is actually just the developer moving building materials to another location, which the town has no interest in anyway. So it's not construction activity. They're just removing construction materials.
And this question came up for me and somebody says, well, I guess they heard what you said last time, or they saw your memo and they said, so you're not in litigation, but you're in negotiations. And I said, yeah, we're in negotiations and our attorney.
There's a difference.
I said, our attorneys are doing the negotiating. And so that seemed to click with, they seemed to understand what that meant then. So.
What are they doing with the materials?
Who cares?
No idea. They're taking them to another site. We don't know what they're doing.
Well, I mean, I
I'm
care,
sorry,
I care because if they're using bunk materials on another job site, then.
Oh,
I
yeah,
wanna know
somebody
that.
else is getting screwed.
All right. Thank you for the update, Greg. Next item is reports, discussion items and announcement. Town managers report. Greg.
We already fully discussed the postal service issues, so I don't think I need to dwell into that too much farther. And then I have now met with all of you once, so if you want to schedule, we're going to schedule another meeting with Dwayne and I, if you want to continue to do that, and I'm open to whatever timing or time frame you would like to do that, but I just think it's good to have one-on-one meetings with you on a regular basis and just see what your priorities are and if there's anything I can do to help get things on the agenda and moving forward that are a priority.
Great. Does anybody have questions for Greg?
And then,
That was just
on
the
that
start.
one.
Sorry, Greg.
I reported a couple weeks ago that I was involved in discussions with Region 10 regarding broadband extension. And if any of you were at the parade yesterday, you probably noticed there was no internet service, none. And that's
Oh, I've
because
been
there's too
noticing
many
it.
people here and we're overloading the system when we get a few more people.
Yep.
If we did this type of build out, that wouldn't happen. So it is something that is important. You couldn't even make phone calls yesterday. If there was some emergency, you were stuck.
That's,
Well, it did go out.
Yeah, well,
There was
Yeah,
a
yeah, there
problem
was
that
an
it went out. It wasn't just
But-
an overload. I think it was more than an overload because
Yeah,
everything
there
did
was
go.
an outage yesterday.
Yeah,
but-
there was an outage that,
but it happens
overnight.
anyway.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
and Greg, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
Greg and I have both met with Corey on multiple occasions, and I've been with the broadband thing since Janet pawned it off on me.
one of
but-
my smarter moves.
Yeah, but, and I love this stuff anyways, but, just so you know, every line that's coming in to Gunnison County is a CenturyLink line.
Yep.
So that's the problem, or not the problem, but that's the bottleneck, right? Even the one coming over Cottonwood that just built a CenturyLink line. And the CenturyLink lines have spare capacity, but they don't lease out that spare capacity. I think Visionary is using some of it, and who's the other one? Extreme is using it. That's why they have a dedicated thing. So as Greg's mentioned before, pulling a line over Kevlar would not use CenturyLink's line. That would use Region 10's line.
And one thing that I want to mention with this also is this is not taking a lot of my time. This is just an issue I want to keep you updated on. But one thing that was suggested was to ask DOLA for a $25,000 administrative grant to do a study of what the best solution to this is. And because Region 10 has the capability of getting DOLA grants, probably through the local governments, because there's one outstanding right now, let them manage the study, the program and everything. We just keep up on what they're doing. Because they are reinitiating this broadband group again, which I think is good.
Oh,
just-
and our wireless networks also use a CenturyLink line. That's why.
So given that, coming over Kebler.
Just a proposal,
I know,
nothing firm.
But, a worthy proposal from my perspective. And the reason I think it is worthy is that, and why we should, encourage Region 10 any way that we can, is just because when it's only CenturyLink, no competition, there's no incentive for, improvement. There's, like no incentive to offer better service. Just competition is good. And so for that reason alone, I say, hell yes, bring it over Kevlar.
You know, hell yes from Dwayne.
Okay.
Rowan?
Did CenturyLink pay their way to run their cable, or is that governmental money? Because that kind of, that kind of sucks, you know? Okay.
Because, yeah, in talking to Corey, he's gone to them before and said, and asked, hey, just give us 2 fiber lines, just give us 2 strands. And they won't even.
But that's what I'm saying, like when they redid Cottonwood, was that taxpayer money that went to pay for
That was
CenturyLink?
just for redundancy, so that the next time the backhoe over by Montrose,
Okay.
there can still be service.
That's kind of a shame, really, when you think about it. When it went out for 3 days a couple of years ago, that was great. So great.
Unless you're in emergency services, and then it was
Terrifying, I imagine.
completely nerve wracking
Yeah.
and terrifying. You're doing these like phone chains and all kinds of ridiculous stuff. So,
Yeah,
but now that I'm not on emergency,
I did have to use the embossing to process credit card transactions. That was a pain in the butt. I'm like, man, these.
most of my backyard has no cell service, so I can just go back there if I need solitude.
In the wayfinding project, we are in the process of having plans and specs drawn up. The information that was presented to the DDA did not get to the detail of being able to bid the project, and they want to bid the project. So we need to be able to tell a potential bidder, this is exactly what we want you to bid on, not a concept. Because if it's a concept, I don't even know how they bid. So we are in the process of getting that done, and as soon as we do, we'll move the project forward. DDA also asked whether we could find any grants. One of the most likely ones was probably going to be something through CDOT or their program called the Ready Grant. And the problem with that thing is the open period for application is March through April. So if we want to hold the project off and not bid it until sometime next June or July or August or later, I don't know how long it takes them to make a decision on a grant. It could push the whole project off by a couple of years in hopes of getting this grant. Timing is a huge issue when it comes to grant projects.
So what I'm hearing is that it's not necessarily advantageous to wait for this grant cycle in March or April, that, push it forward now.
Well, one thing we could look at is right now we're looking at implementing phase 1. But we could potentially maybe apply for a grant for phase 2 or 3 or whatever. So knowing that that's somewhere in the future, it depends on how we bid the project. If we bid it on phase 1, it makes it more likely to be able to apply for a grant. If you bid it as the whole entire project, and then we'll just implement it as we get cash, then that's a little harder to apply for a grant for.
Have you talked with Michelle Haynes, Region 10, about all the Main Street USA grants?
I haven't.
You might want to check with her. There was, usually every summer they have a Main Street USA type of grant.
What was the grant amount that you would identify?
25K.
25, and then,
So that would require a match.
right. And then the DDA also was requesting clarification on the composition of phase one. I recall that being a topic of conversation. More clear maps of what was part of phase one.
Well, and as we put together plans and specs, and there is someone who knows what they're doing the plans and specs, we're not doing that in-house. And if you bid it by phase, you can clearly define what's in phase one.
Right.
If you bid it as one great big project and say, we'll do the phases as we get money, it's a little harder to define the individual.
Right. And then can you clarify, that was the other question of what was lacking from the plans presented? Because there was heights, materials, color palettes, the whole thing. So what was lacking from what was provided?
It doesn't have the specification. It has some general descriptions, but it doesn't have specifications, the things that someone can measure and can, so everybody's bidding the same exact project.
Can you give me an example of a specification?
What are the components of the individual signs? How do you put them together? Do they have a certain amount of aluminum or no aluminum? Do they have a certain amount of acrylics or no acrylics? And how do they get put together? How are they extended? We may, and we probably do want to do what's called value engineering with this project, where someone who knows how to look at it can say, if you used X materials, you could save this much money. Do you want to go there, or do you want to do it for the far more expensive materials? But that's all a decision you can make once you have the specs.
Okay. Just on the last comment about the materials and whatnot, I thought Kristen had built that in, and we had that discussion as part of our the DDA's vetting of the process, whether we were going to do wood or metal or something, and we had settled on certain materials because of some of those reasons. So are we going to expect further changes to the design that was presented?
Well, there could be suggestions to some of those. And it just depends. It really is a good thing to go through value engineering and have an engineer tell you, this is the same product. It could cost you, or it's this much different, and is it worth this much in savings? Saying whether you want the product she was talking about or wood are two entirely different things. Those are not comparable products.
Okay, so it'll be similar, but just
Yeah,
slightly different.
what they'll be able to tell you is this will meet specs, but you could get it for less money.
Okay, I was just worried we're gonna go down the logo route and like,
No,
you know,
I-
we approved this thing and then it's like, oh, wait, we're gonna, you know.
No, I think this is just part of the process of putting together plans and
Okay.
specs. And we'll get this done as quickly as we can. It's just a matter. Well, an important thing with it is, even if you would have gone with what the original recommendation was, you still would have, as part of the project, paid for plans and specs. It just would have been buried in the entire cost. It doesn't mean that that cost is new or would not be in existence afterward. It just means it would have been paid for in a different. We listened to a presentation last week on PARA, which is the Colorado Public Employees Retirement Agency.
Association?
I don't know.
I'm betting on association.
Yeah.
And it is somewhat similar to the retirement plan that the town is using right now, which is a Social Security replacement retirement plan. And so one of the things that we talked about is, like, when you compare it to, say, Crested Butte, they're in Social Security. So when they have a retirement system, it's in addition to Social Security. para and the current program are Social Security replacement programs. So if that's all you offer employees as retirement, it's essentially giving them the equivalent of Social Security, which is not enough to retire on. It never has been.
So why would we want to do that?
It gives a little more predictability in that with para, you can get a pension plan or you can get a defined contribution plan, and they also offer other retirement options too that potentially could be funded by the town to improve someone's situation.
So you. so
Want to
you-
encourage
so you would
people to
have a
save.
choice as a town employee to either have a defined benefit or a defined contribution plan,
Through para, you can, yes.
which, and it's just my assumption that every, all the employees would choose the benefit plan versus the contribution plan.
Some would and some wouldn't. You really do need to look at your individual retirement needs and when you plan to retire. There's just so many different things that
Other
I'm not going to
resources.
start to say what's right or wrong because it's for every
Yeah, right
individual.
on.
And Carl offered to meet with every employee to have that discussion, yes? And have those discussions been happening as far as you know?
I think he's had at least a couple already.
There were some good questions during the presentation from staff, for sure.
Yeah. And
So is there anything required of us to, dial into
yes,
that?
the board
versus-
would have to approve associating with para.
Okay.
And
And are we doing that right now?
not yet. No.
Okay.
They have to figure out what would happen when all of that happens, because it would freeze the current plan and you'd have to be able to tell employees what's happening with that,
Yeah.
because para would start all over again.
So this is 6 months from now, 3 months from now?
I think we're just talking a few months. If this is something you would like to pursue, I'd be happy to put it on the next agenda, just for you to say you would or you would not.
Well, my question would be, what do the employees?
Yeah, that's the piece we
You know.
need, and we're not ready
And I
for
don't know
that
that
yet,
yet.
right? So let's give Carl some time to,
And then
to have
Carl will
those
come and tell
discussions.
us what the consensus is, and we'll go from there.
We have a lot of employees who want it just because it gives them predictability. If a pension plan gives you predictability. in retirement.
Yeah, defined benefit is, from my perspective, is way gooder than a contribution plan, but that's just.
So we're working on it, and as soon as we have some more information, we'll make some recommendations. And para is just a little bit more expensive than the current plan. I think our current one total is 18%, so it's 8 from the employee and 10 from the employer, and para is 9 from the employee and 10 town. So the town's share doesn't change. But anything as an employer you can do to encourage employees to save for their retirement is a good thing. Because a lot of people just don't think about it. It's frightening to me when I hear statistics that the average baby boomer has now saved $30,000 for their retirement. That is frightening.
sometimes you have a lifestyle and you just think, I'm gonna die young. I don't know, this retirement thing,
Or you
you know?
hope so.
Yeah, really.
My dad knew a guy a lot of years ago who said, I'm only living 10 years, and he spent every dime in retirement in 10 years, and that was it.
You did, you live up.
Because if you're firm on that end date, you can make all that work.
Have $1.42 left.
Buy some Tic Tacs.
And then I think a week ago in the department head meeting, we discussed the questions that you'd raised, Roman, on the campground thing. And so I just answered them here. If you have any questions about those, I'm happy to follow up on them.
I do have a clarification question, and I see some of the stuff as just challenges rather than
perhaps shutting down the idea, but in the third paragraph, fences cannot exceed 6 feet in height, but to contain dogs, a fence would have to be 6 feet in height.
So initially what the thought was is that we could put up a chain link fence and we can't.
Right.
And that it has to be 6 feet in height,
Okay.
or it doesn't have to be 6 feet in height. That's the maximum. But there's a lot of dogs that can jump a 4-foot fence. And so if
Our
you're,
dog could.
if you're trying to contain the animals so that they can't do anything else, you at least need a 6-foot fence. That's what that means.
Okay. So this is possible.
So
to
it would
put
be
the fence.
allowed.
Okay.
As long as it was wood. Or
As long as
not
it's
chain
something
link.
other than chain link.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Chain mesh?
because the other side of it too is I've been involved in projects with the FAA to put fencing at airports. And they require you to bury the fence 3 or 4 feet into the ground to keep things from digging under the fence.
Sure. I will.
So,
I don't think we have
you know,
that issue.
knowing, well, my dog, he likes to dig holes. And he could go under a 6-foot fence probably in a matter of minutes if you let him.
Okay, well, I mean,
So all of those things would have to be considered.
my first reaction would be that's not a concern for me, that we need to
Yeah, I don't
bury
have
a,
dogs, so I don't.
bury a wooden fence underground. So dogs can't dig under it. Understanding that staff doesn't seem to have the bandwidth for this. I would be fine just making some appropriate signage of rules and what it's intended for and make it free. I mean, we're trying to put a Band-Aid on a problem here. And I don't want our answer to be couldn't manage it, so we didn't want to make it free, or we had some challenges with fencing and that stalled the whole thing. You know, we're trying to give people options to be able to.
Is that including the dog part of it, or are you saying separate?
Well, it sounds like all we need to do is get a 6-foot tall fence that's made out of wood.
But what are you fencing in?
Dogs.
No, I mean.
The whole
how much?
campground
Are you
or
like the whole
area
campground or
or-
what?
Yeah. Not the whole piece of property, but just where the pads are. Yeah, I don't know what the expense is. That's maybe some direction would give to get some pricing, but you know, if it's gonna cost $100,000 to put up a fence, then we're probably not gonna move forward with that. We also need to establish whether or not that's a critical issue that we think dogs are gonna be.
That's
you
what
know,
I was. gonna look at,
harassing,
Roman. You know, is how many dogs are we, you know? What
You're
kind of
talking about
data,
different-
what kind of data do we have to
If
pull
they see
from?
the
None.
horses, they're gonna go after the horses.
Well, nobody stays there, so there's zero data. And we're trying to encourage people to use it as a facility. So,
And like was mentioned here, if we market a free campground, we're gonna get more use. Right now, we don't market it.
Yep.
Here's a question I just kind of see in my brain. Do you want to see a fence out there as well in the
No,
wildflowers?
I don't.
And I guess how would the fence hold up over the winter? And
I-
I'm just
yeah.
asking that question. I don't know.
I suppose the similar question would be, how do we feel about a giant development out at North Village instead of wildflowers? I mean, we're talking about a wooden fence here, and we're trying to provide a temporary solution for housing.
No, that's just why I asked the practical question, but.
Yeah,
But as far as, and we're in reports part of the meeting, but just to move forward, would that be like a next step, like spitball, how much a fence would actually cost?
yeah, I look at these as challenges, not
For sure.
tamping out the project.
And one thing to keep in mind is the campground is part of parcel F. So depending on how you want to develop that property, that should be part of the discussion.
And we're talking about a fence that can be taken down in a year or two, or we're not talking about, you know, building a concrete wall. So
And I'm no fence guy, but I would think the number's closer to 100 grand than
Well,
zero.
You know, I don't know if this is the appropriate forum to bring up this idea with the fence, but somebody I know that used to live here, his brother, I believe it is, installs underground dog fencing. And, you know, maybe this,
If that
Is a
only
thing-
works if you had the call.
Collar.
right?
You know,
And-
so, you know,
and-
you would just offer everybody to stay a collar for the
But
dog.
then we get to the no bandwidth to manage the facility. So,
I
Well,
think
You
yeah.
can't just put the collar on the dog. You have
Right.
to train the dog.
Yeah.
my dog won't be trained by an invisible fence.
But anyway, again, it's reports and discussion part of the meeting. So
We
Getting
can,
a co- getting a-
we can,
So this
we
would-
can work
this would
to
be a
flesh it out
future
if you would
agenda
like to do
item.
that, so that,
Future agenda item?
well, I mean,
No.
just further information.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
okay.
And then regarding RC1, so if the TCCA controls the lot
Why do we own it?
that we own,
They have an easement.
but would developing an RV site be considered developing the lot, nullifying the easement?
And I'm not, I don't think they're necessarily opposed to that. I think it's just part of the discussion in dealing with housing issues.
Well, I know CBMR in our DDA meeting, they were open to certain ideas of alleviating the housing problem. And this is an opportunity for them to be part of that solution and sort of play nice. Because it's just gonna be for the summer, which they don't use a whole lot anyway. So so maybe that's worth exploring as a further discussion.
yeah. No, and I think what I'm taking from all this is let's keep working on it. Sure.
Okay.
And your thinking is that, you know, the RVs would just be, you know, like a stopgap measure, temporary, while we work on something that's
Yeah,
more permanent?
this is giving people an opportunity who are used to sleeping in their cars out the Slate River Road, another option
Yeah.
because of the designated
And-
camping issue.
Concurrent with moving forward an idea of, you know, what we talked about earlier.
Sure.
Right on.
But I misunderstood you. When it, when,
Uh,
with the,
Well, that's not really ready for public discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
with the camper issue, there were comments both on our staff and from CBMR that it would not be as sightly coming into town if you have campers.
That's-
come. That's
That's
the
the
one.
world we're living in.
Yep.
You know, people need a place to stay. Sorry if it doesn't look good to some people.
Yeah.
But that's my passionate response.
I would agree with.
Something has to flex a little bit. And, you know, it's to be intended for not somebody to set up like they're tailgating at a sporting event, but a place for them to safely and legally park their
Criminals,
vehicle.
yeah.
and sleep
And
in.
over the winter, Telluride did 6 of those in their park office area. And they provided them with power, but they didn't provide them with a way to dump sewage or any of that kind of stuff. So if they had to do that, they had to leave and come back.
Yeah, and generally, the kind of person that's gonna be using this facility probably doesn't have a big RV. They have a sports van or, you know, an Astro van or a Toyota Corolla, you know? So that's interesting
But
to
I
hear
know
about
they
the winter.
tested it, and as far as I know, there weren't any problems.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes. Greg, anything else? Okay. Tiffany, do you have anything?
Just a couple quick things. July 12th at 9 AM, we're doing a town council retreat in here. You're gonna spend like an hour and a half, 2 hours with June. And then after that, you're gonna spend it with Greg talking about budget and budget goals.
What time was that?
July 12th,
9 AM.
9 AM to about 1 PM is our estimate.
But will there be refreshments?
Huh?
Will there be refreshments?
Greg told me he would tell me that later.
What's that?
Refreshments.
We can provide whatever you want.
Rum?
You want lunch, we can do lunch.
I'm gonna order it in because I spend enough time cooking at home. So if you guys want me to provide lunch, I'll provide lunch. If you want snacks,
I think if we're going to 1 o'clock, we should probably have some lunch, some food of some sort.
lunch, sandwiches, pizza.
Sandwiches are fine.
All of the above?
I'll get treasury to get some
Shawarma would
sandwiches
be nice.
together.
It's been a while.
And then July 12th, town picnic, 5 o'clock here,
July 12th?
August
July
12th?
28th.
Oh.
Yes, July 28th, sorry. It's I stayed out too late watching the fireworks down in Gunny last night. Fireworks, sorry. I watched the
Fires.
fireworks
And I am planning on my contribution.
for the town picnic. Okay, that's good to know.
Super Tuscan?
Email me, call me, RSVP,
Mhm.
and bring a side dish, and we have music by Sunny Downpour.
Oh,
coming to
cool.
the picnic.
Those two are fun.
Cool.
Is that what you want as a Super Tuscan?
I don't know, just, that's what
That'd be one of them.
that's what you always throw out there is what your favorite is.
Yeah.
And that's all I have.
Thank you, Tiffany. Next is town council reports and discussion items. I'll see my report. The only thing I would add to that is just another plug. Like Dwayne said, CML was amazing. All kinds of stuff to talk about, but I would boil it down to just commiserating with other folks who are doing the same thing that you are doing. Is very valuable, and just hearing their experiences and how they're tackling some of this stuff. There wasn't anything that was like a silver bullet that I was like, oh my God, this is gonna change our town or anything like that. But it was valuable and educational, and I don't know, just made me feel good about what we're doing. So that's all.
I had just a quick, really awesome news with the Valley Housing Fund type of deal. They had the Redden project approved for the 3 mobile home units. And then they also, they've completed the closing documents for the Wilson project, that property. Yeah, so it's pretty sweet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Go ahead, Roman.
The store committee was recognized for its use of Colorado lottery GOCO funding.
Cool.
So it was one of only a few places that were, or entities that were called out for that.
Was it a particular project?
It was
Like Shady
for,
Island or something? Or-
no, it was just an amount.
Right on.
I also had something about our logo. I see that's being used on everything, which is cool. Did we actually vote on a final? I thought we were still like tossing ideas around.
We voted on a
There was a
final.
vote.
Okay,
We did.
I just didn't remember that, so.
Yeah, I mean,
It's because you were in Italy.
no, it's like a few things, the discussion sometimes gets a little amorphous right before the vote, but we did have a vote.
And that's all.
Cool.
I think Steve made the motion on the vote.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure we had one. I just,
Positive Steve called it.
Janet?
Participated briefly in the Art Center board meeting last Tuesday. Yeah, they did, they cut the agenda down to about like that before they went into executive session, and they kicked me out since I'm not a full-fledged board member. But you'll all know at this point that
What?
they fired Matt Newfield.
Okay.
Who was
and
there for
I'm
how
not
many
sure-
months?
Not very
February?
long.
I was gonna say, that was the new executive director, right?
Yeah.
Was.
Oh.
Huh? Art Center.
Oh,
So the ED is gone, and they're using 3 of the women that have been working there for some time to kind of work together and running things. And I'm meeting with one of them, Jillian, who's kind of the top one of the 3 for some reason. I'll find out more about that on Friday. I'm meeting with her Friday to chat about It was mostly to chat about what happened with the rest of the retreat that I had to leave early from to come to a town council meeting.
All right. Thank you, Janet. Anybody else reports?
Yeah, in case you don't know, the construction project on US 50 Little Blue Canyon, the daytime closures are over. The full daytime closures are over. It will be open during daytime hours from 7:30, or excuse me, 6:30, no, 7:30 to 7:30 essentially, for one lane traffic. So it's not gonna be full closures. They'll just,
The
Half
pilot car.
half an hour,
yeah.
half an hour
And
slots.
the reason for that is because they are starting work on the other road that goes over the dam going to Paonia. What's that
North
one?
Rim?
92.
92, yeah, they're starting work on that one. So you can't really have,
Both of
you
them
can't
at
have
the same
closure
time.
and construction on the detour as well. So
And the clear past bit, is that like rockfall mitigation, or are they repaving it, or what are they doing over
I
there?
don't know about the last section.
I don't, the last time I wrote on that, I didn't remember that there were rumble strips at every corner, but there are now.
Yeah,
And
I
now
had
you
to go
drove,
to
they
Durango
wake you
next
up.
week. Which way
I
would you
don't know
go?
what you call
I
it.
would,
No.
I would still go through.
That's
over
probably a good
Wolf
thing.
Creek. I would still go over Wolf Creek if I was going to rank.
Drop down 114 to.
I drove that project this spring. I still don't understand what they're really doing of significance.
In Little Blue?
Yeah.
Oh, you should
they're
drive.
They're
it.
widening
backing
the
the roads
road.
off a lot.
Yeah, it's gonna be wider
It's gonna
and
be
less
much
curvy.
straighter and wider.
According
I
to
don't know
one
where they were gonna straighten
analysis,
it. It seemed like the same road.
You'll,
according to one analysis, it'll save you about 3 minutes getting to Montrose.
Well, it's not, it's
but
not,
it'll also
it's not the
stay,
time.
it'll
Well,
also
it's-
stay
it'll-
open.
And it'll save 2 lives a century.
Well, if you know
Well-
that, so if you're coming
Well,
east.
hey, no, hold on, Dwayne,
I'm-
you're mocking that,
I-
but they average one death a year on that highway.
And that, so when
Yeah.
when you're coming east and you first come into Little Blue Canyon, you have that first right-hander that is like one of the highest crash spots in Colorado.
But they do.
Because
average
people don't
one-
know how to drive.
That's true too.
they
I mean,
average
how
one
much
death.
cheaper would it be to train people to drive well?
Probably not very much.
Honestly, I don't know.
I'm sorry, I'm twisted, I admit it.
But with that said, it is, instead of being done in November, as they were planning to at the beginning of winter, Little Blue will probably not finish until late summer, early
Shocker,
fall next year.
shocker. Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, anybody have an argument with that?
No.
Tiffany, Greg, Kathy, Alec, Roman, Janet, Wayne, Michael, thank
Thank
you
you.
all for being here tonight.
Okay.
What movie is that? Night Joe Bob? Night